Welcome back, everybody, to the Solved podcast. I am bestselling author Mark Manson, and this is my intrepid co-host, producer, and today, opponent.
Your adversary.
Drew Birdie.
Here we go.
And today, we are putting love on trial. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a few reasons for this. We just did a massive Solved episode on dating, and we went through all of the different factors that bring people together, why human courtship is so strange and long and complex and socially varied, why people date the wrong people for themselves, why they date the right people for themselves, what causes attraction. But one of the things that was conspicuously missing from that episode was a deep discussion of romantic love. And that's because we wanted to do this episode and ask the question, is love overrated? You hear all these tropes, all these cliches that love is all you need, that love, all you need is love. Love fixes everything. Love is blind. Love. Is it true, though? So we're going to do something a little bit different and interesting this episode, everybody. We are putting love on trial. I am going to be the prosecutor, and I'm going to be making the argument that love is completely overrated.
Naturally.
And causes, of course, I'm just a bucket of fucking glee over here.
Yep.
I'm going to be arguing that love arguably causes more problems than it solves. And then Drew, famous for being a romantic.
Resident romantic.
Yes.
Yep.
Is going to be defending love.
That's right.
We're going to go back and forth. Each of us, we're going to take turns making arguments, and then the other person will have a rebuttal. And then at the end, we will try to come together and find some sort of compromise and decide, is love overrated, or am I just a cold, black-hearted soul?
Jury's out on that.
Stay tuned.
So, yeah.
More at 6.
That's another episode, but yeah.
Yes. So getting right into it, as the prosecution, I will begin with one damning claim against love, and that is that love is our brain's con man. Love is a neurochemical hijacking that is specifically designed to override our better judgment and cause us to become delusional and misrepresent the people that we care about in our minds. In 2005, Helen Fisher, who's somebody that we're going to be talking about quite a bit, excellent researcher, especially around the topic of romantic love, her and her colleagues put people who self-reported being, quote, intensely in love into an fMRI machine and showed them photos of the people that they were obsessed about. And the ventral tegmental area, the brain's dopamine factory, lit up like a slot machine. And when I say slot machine, I literally mean slot machine, because it was the same reaction that you see with addicts. In fact, they even wrote in the paper that the region of the brain fired and lit up in the same way that it lights up when you show a cocaine addict cocaine. So
A little dramatic, but okay.
yeah, I mean, I've definitely had some people in my life that felt like cocaine.
No,
I'm not going to lie. So there is this addictive quality to romantic love. And I think we've all felt it to a certain extent. You know, if you think about times that you've been madly in love with somebody, you obsess over them, you think about them all the time, you like scheme and connive ways to see them again or to get closer to them, or like a cocaine addict, you're even willing to blow up your whole fucking life for them.
Do a lot of stupid shit, yes.
Yes, you do a lot of stupid shit. Now, what's interesting is that these parts of the brain that were lit up, they were not the emotion centers. They were the motivation system of the brain.
Right.
So what it suggests, counter to what most people assume, is that love is not necessarily a feeling. It's a drive. It's a motivation. It's a primal state like hunger or thirst. So it's not that you feel love for your partner. It is you are hungry for your partner, Drew.
Okay. I mean, okay, this is true. This is true. Your motivational centers, like the ventral tegmental area, it's full of dopamine. Dopamine is, like we've discussed before, it's the wanting, not the liking. It's motivation. It's not the actual reward system. It's the motivation to seek out reward. Okay.
Yes.
Sure. One little point I'll make. Right.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. It's
before
similar,
I continue.
Before you continue. Yes. Cocaine and love share a lot of like neurological mechanisms. I get that. Is that love's fault or is that cocaine's fault though? Okay. This is what I don't like. People are like, oh, love is an addiction. Well, it's just like cocaine. It's like, well, cocaine came much for longer after love was on the scene.
I'll just note that cocaine does not have a great track record with people.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
The point of all of this is that because romantic love is more of a drive rather than a feeling, if you look at what psychologically happens to us towards the things that we are driven towards or motivated for, is that we backwards rationalize the reasons that we want them.
Sure.
Right? And this is true of all things. Like this is if I decide that I want a Rolls Royce and that's what's going to solve all my problems in my life, I will sit there and backwards rationalize all these explanations and reasons that it should make sense, and it's completely logical that I spend all my money on a Rolls Royce. We do the same thing with our romantic partners. And again, I think everybody's had this experience at some point where you see you're obsessed with this person, and maybe there's some questionable behavior going on, but man, you find plenty of ways to rationalize that behavior to yourself. It turns out that there is evidence for this as well, because romantic love deactivates the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, which are the two reasons for having critical judgment about people. So literally when you're looking at the person that you're in love with, your judgment faculties are in a large part turned off. Have you ever had a friend who just dated an awful person? You were like, why are you dating that awful person?
Yes, we all have.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And you're always...
Sometimes I've been that friend. So.
Yes.
Yes.
Me too. I have also been that friend before.
This definitely happens. Yeah. Sure.
And this is why you get this situation where you're sitting there, you're watching your friend date this terrible person, and you're like, dude, what are you doing? How do you not see this?
Right.
And you want to tell them, but the funny thing is even if you try to tell them, they can't see it.
Right.
And they will have all sorts of rationalizations and excuses prepped and ready to go because their brain is already primed.
One of those big ones is because I love them, right? Yes. Okay.
What's worse is that this reward system, this motivation system, continues even after the relationship ends. So even if you get your heart broken, and Helen Fisher, being a great scientist, took people who had their hearts broken and put them into the same fMRI machine and saw that they had the same region of their brain light up. So that motivation system continues even after the person is gone or even after you're no longer in a relationship with them. So it's like, imagine being constantly motivated towards something that is impossible to attain.
Okay.
It's just a whole new level of suffering. That's why you could say that's why breakups are as painful as they are. In the research literature, this whole phase, this whole kind of delusional obsession with a person, this cocaine addiction to another human being, is often referred to as limerence. It's this highly irrational, highly emotional, slightly delusional state that people get into with each other. And this is kind of your like storybook rom-com love feeling. Like it's just the world is spinning and nothing else matters. And oh my God, we were destined to be together and it's only you and blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, it's like the roof's falling apart and there are bills to be paid, but nobody's paying them. And your father's disowning you and like all this stuff is happening, but it's like, but I'm in love. But the problem, the catch about limerence is that it is temporary. It only lasts. Of course. It only lasts for a few years at most. Mm-hmm. And so the theory goes is that limerence, or this kind of cocaine addiction obsession with another person, nature instilled this in us just long enough to make a baby. And then, now reality sets in. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, never mind. Actually, yeah, you are kind of annoying. Right. Yeah, I got shit to do. Sorry, I got to go.
Helen Fisher calls this the 4-year itch.
Yes.
Right, yeah. Because what they found in the research was that after about 4 years is usually like that's a time actually when people get divorced or separate in some way. And that's usually just long enough to raise a kid to where they're independent enough.
Yep.
And then they fuck
peace
off.
out. Yeah.
Okay.
And you see this too. I mean, it's if you look at where breakups or divorces spike, it is right around this period.
Yeah.
And it's also why in like relationship advice literature, you often see this referred to as the honeymoon period, right? It's like when you meet somebody new, you have a new relationship, that first year or two is just like absolutely golden. Everything seems perfect. Everything's happy all the time. The person you're in love with can do no wrong. And then suddenly reality sets in and you actually have to face who you're with. So that is my first argument, that love is a con man. It's nature's con man to get you to procreate, to get you to vastly overestimate what is probably a highly flawed individual, to obsess over them and become addicted to them the way you would a slot machine or cocaine, and then eventually have the receipts come due 2 to 4 years later.
Okay. All right. I'll just reiterate before I get into my note too. Is love hijacking the cocaine system, or is cocaine hijacking the love system? Right.
I definitely, cocaine's hijacking the love system.
Obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I always thought that argument was a little bit hyperbolic, to say the least. Okay.
Have you been around a person on cocaine and watched them make decisions?
Oh, well, I get that. And yes, there are parallels.
Because I feel like you're proving my point here.
Fair. No. And that is fair. That's actually, I don't disagree with any of that.
Yeah.
Love makes us do some pretty stupid shit.
Yes.
I will, and I'll vouch for that. I've been there, right? We all have.
Yes.
And I've seen it in friends like you were talking about. It's easier to see in other people. And that blinding kind of like nature of being in love it makes it really hard to see it in yourself.
Yes.
Like, okay, I get that. Here's the thing though, this whole hijack thing is like, oh, love is hijacking your brain and your behavior and whatever. So is every other drive that we have. When you get hungry, your brain is being hijacked. When you get thirsty, your brain is being hijacked.
This is true.
Right? Why? Right? And it's because evolution has figured this out over hundreds of thousands of generations, millions and billions of years. We've figured this out. Evolution has. It has a purpose, right? It has if this feeling of love and infatuation with somebody else consistently led to poor decisions, which I mean, it does lead to poor decisions, don't get me wrong, but if it led to poor mate selection over and over again, poor results in your reproductive fitness, it wouldn't be around still today, right? Like it serves a purpose. It's highly conserved across humanity, this pair bond. Now, like, sexual fidelity and everything like that, we can discuss whether that's supernatural or whatever, but having this like emotional affinity and attachment to another person, that's highly conserved across all cultures, even the most promiscuous and randiest of all of us. We still like have at least a period where we're temporarily fixed on one person, right?
Yeah.
That's a feature, not a bug. Okay. I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Why is that though? In the relationship or in the dating episode, we talked about the parental investment theory. And human infants require so much. They have these tiny little brains that need to grow into big brains. Only 25% of our brains are developed when we come out of the womb. We have to do 75% of brain development outside of the womb. Okay. So, and that takes a very, very long time.
That explains a lot.
It does explain a lot, right? When you have a 2-year-old throwing a fit, they're maybe only, 30% of the way there or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Children, they required these years and years of intensive care, of protection, of investment just to survive.
Yeah.
Okay. The way evolution has figured out, okay, how can we up the chances of that child surviving? It's by having more people help raise that child. Love and attachment and commitment, those are the mechanisms by which we've figured this out. Okay. So it evolved to solve that coordination problem, this parental coordination problem. Okay, yes. There you have this temporary insanity, basically, is what we're calling it, what you're calling it, right? You have this temporary insanity, sure, that's fine. But it serves a very, very functional purpose. And that is just to get two people to stay together long enough to raise this child. Like, okay, that 4-year itch I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
When a child's about 4 years old, they're usually in play groups and other people they're a little bit more independent enough. And yes, somebody can go off and, it's okay for the union to dissolve if it has to at that point. But it doesn't always either. That's the other thing, is that there's long-term research on happily married couples. There was this one study that was done with, I think the average was about 21 years married or together. And there's still people who are in love.
Yeah.
But they also have an additional component where there's this commitment and attachment and loyalty, kind of this companionate love that you have. So you still can have this passion for somebody and develop a deeper commitment over time.
Yeah.
So it's not just, it isn't necessarily just, this all goes away after 18 to 36 months.
That is true. I do want to make one quick point though about the evolution piece, which is that you are correct that the limerence or romantic love, it evolved as kind of a mechanism to coordinate people into pair bonds to have children and develop attachment to the children. And yes, part of this delusion or irrationality that comes along with it, as you said, it's a feature, not a bug. I would argue that for most of human history, if we're living on the savannah and you become delusional about some chick, it like the downsides are pretty minimal. Like if you just like have a completely out of touch with reality perception of like who she is or what she's into or what your life's going to be like if you're dating her, there's nothing going on. There's like life's pretty fucking bare. So there's not a whole lot to lose in that situation. In the modern world, there's so much to lose. And the stakes are so much higher. If you are dating the wrong person, if you say move cross country to move in with this person after knowing them for a week, if you are like ditching your friends or changing your jobs to like satisfy your new girlfriend or whatever, there's a lot of repercussions. So that would only be my caveat to that.
Okay. Well, at the same time too, people in long-term committed relationships are consistently, they're happier and healthier. And I'll get to that in another section a little bit here. So we'll put a pin in that. So I don't know. I mean, yes, that could be just more of a problem though of modern society itself. Like we need to get rid of love so we can have a more efficient modern society. Like, come on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So we can get more done.
Good. I'm glad we agree.
More money. I don't think so.
Glad we agree.
Okay. One other thing I'll say about this hijack kind of hypothesis you have though too.
Yes.
Again, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It wasn't just that like, oh, there was this like mutation that came along that we like some people started to pair bond and some people didn't. And now we have to fight about if that's right or wrong. It's not that at all, actually. There was a really interesting study that came out just a couple of years ago. Do you know all this research about prairie voles?
I was like, oh, here come the prairie voles. Here come the prairie voles.
This is awesome. This is okay. So it's really cool natural experiment that's happened over hundreds of thousands of years. So there's these voles. They're like little rodents, like little mice, basically, right? And there's different species of voles. One species in particular pair bonds. So they're monogamous in the sense that they'll get together and the males will help the females raise the young. Yeah. Okay. Now they get around, they're promiscuous, they cheat on each other just like humans do and whatever, but they form this attachment to another vole. Okay.
Yeah.
There's another species of vole, I think it's the meadow vole that is just completely just out there. They're just, they're having fun and going at it.
Yeah.
And there's no parental investment from the males. Okay. So what they found, like there's all these studies going back into the 90s, 80s and 90s. This is where they figured out that oxytocin is a very important neuropeptide that helps regulate this pair bond attachment that we have. Okay. Originally, what they think happened to was, there's this whole evolutionary arc where oxytocin gets released when a mammalian mother is lactating. Okay. It helps release milk from the breasts, okay? What they think happened then, though, was that evolution selected that chemical as a neuropeptide, too, that gave them an emotional attachment to the offspring, okay? And then it co-opted it again to make us bond to each other. So it used that same kind of framework and it's just like, oh, we're going to use it for this now. We're going to use it for this now. It's a whole new mechanism, okay? So there was this really cool study though a few years ago. So everybody thought like, oh, oxytocin, it's the love hormone.
Yeah.
I was on one of the first studies that we used oxytocin in primates to like look at how it increases affiliative behaviors between males and females. It was really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So we even found this like, yeah, this is pretty true. And it's pretty robust finding over and over. However, a few years ago, they found that they did these genetic mutations on these prairie voles and they knocked out that oxytocin receptor. So they didn't even have it. There was no receptor for them, for the oxytocin swirling around in their bodies to attach on their brain and like, make them go and attach to another vole. Okay?
Right.
Yet they still did it.
Huh.
Okay. So it wasn't just like, oh, this like random mutation happened and there's this one chemical that did it and it was kind of just a mistake or it was just a fluke and it kind of works and kind of doesn't. No. Their interpretation was there's actually lots of redundant systems that if one of these fails, we're going to use another one to attach to make you attach to another individual.
It's super fascinating. Just a quick aside for the listener. One of the reasons why researchers study prairie voles so much is that they are one of the only species. Like it's actually very rare in the animal kingdom to be monogamous, lifelong monogamous to another partner. And prairie voles are one of the closest and most easily studied mammals that are long-term monogamous. Right. So that's why they get studied so much. And because it's so rare, you would kind of assume that it is just a fluke mutation,
Right.
or just like something some gene that got switched somewhere along the line. But yeah, that is fascinating. That
Right.
it is there is a lot more at play.
The point is, Mother Nature thought it was so important that it created redundant systems. So like if this thing fails, we're going to have a backup. One of those is, if you want to get real nerdy about it, arginine vasopressin, which is a related chemical to oxytocin. There's this whole opioid system that we have is probably involved as well. There's all these systems in the brain.
Coming back with the drugs, dude.
That's true. Well, and that's a big reason. I mean, if you do look at it, people who have like worse social lives, don't have a lot of romantic prospects, they're more likely to do drugs.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yes, there is a parallel there.
It's probably not a coincidence.
And it's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Okay.
The OCD kind of obsession, that we do have with somebody though too. You're right. That's a motivational system. It's a motivation. It's not a feeling. It's a motivational system.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It is. But what that does is it focuses our attention on one person long enough for us to form a bond with them. Yes, we're delusional about it. We have to put aside some harsh judgments for a while in order to form that bond. Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely necessary though, if you want to get into that next stage of that companionate love, which I think we'll get into a little bit more later. But I think this is a clever way that Mother Nature figured out. Is like, okay, yes, suspend their judgment for a little while. Yes, there's some downsides. Of course, there's some downsides. There's going to be some cost.
Yeah.
But the upside is that we get to continue the species. So, therefore,
Drew Birdie
love is not overrated.
Drew Birdie has spoken. It's your turn to bring an argument.
Round number 2, I'm going to come in. Okay. Love is social infrastructure. Okay, it's not just this feeling. It's not just this addiction we have. It doesn't just make us do stupid shit. It actually makes us do a lot of really awesome things too. It's the foundation of social fabric all over the world in all cultures. We find that it's not just like this lifestyle choice that we get. It's not just a luxury. It's actually underpins so much of human civilizations, not just families and kinship groups, which obviously it does that. The larger communities that you're in, whole economic systems, we base just about every single society around the world bases their economic system. The most basic unit is going to be the family unit, right? Yep. Which is organized through marriage. These emotions and ultimately marriage, right? Inheritance laws, all these legal frameworks. There's so many laws that if they're not directly addressing something about marriage and cohabitation or anything like that, there's indirectly related to that. Our legal frameworks they're all of these are based around people pairing off and building lives together. There might be infidelity. There might be other systems where there's polyamory, there's polygyny, there's polygamy. There all of those things. Sure. Mm-hmm. Still, underlying all of that is an affinity between two people. There's a pair bond of some kind. Okay, that underlies a lot of this. This creates, I would argue, a more stable society as well, right? I think I'm a little bit of living proof of this as well too.
Yeah.
So, I talked about this before. Grew up in humble means. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, but my parents stayed together. Mm-hmm. Okay. And look at all the data around outcomes for children of 2-parent households, right? They're so much better. They're better academically. They end up making more money over time. They're better mental health wise, and health wise in general. They live longer. Have fewer health problems, better quality of life as they age if you come from a 2-parent household, okay? There's a lot of mitigating factors around that too, I get it. But again, that pair bond is kind of central to all of those downstream effects that happen, okay? We evolved to co-regulate. We talked about this a lot in the emotions episode that we did. There's a co-regulation that happens with other people. It can happen with friendships, but the most intimate form of that is with a romantic partner, right? Your brain actually expects partnership. It looks for and seeks out partnership. Being isolated actually requires much more metabolic resources. To give you just one example of kind of how this works, so that there's this hand-holding experiment. I think I brought this up in a previous episode too, but they brought people into an fMRI, and they were going to administer a shock to them. Okay. And they told them up front they were going to do this, obviously. So they had to just have them do it alone. And what they saw was in the fMRIs, their amygdalas were firing like crazy before, during, and after the shock experience. But if they had their romantic partner come in and hold their hand during it, that greatly reduced that. Okay.
Interesting.
Greatly reduced it. our brains are they're looking for, and they're wired for companionship and an attachment figure. So they showed that same study, they showed like a friend came in and it showed some reduction in the firing of that too. And then strangers as well, and they showed some reduction. But the greatest reduction in that kind of threat response, that brain neural threat response, was from the romantic partner. Okay? Your brain is actually looking for this. Like when you're in a committed relationship, you actually, those threat detection systems in your brain aren't like constantly going off, but it just frees you up to do other things too. You've talked about this before, Mark.
Yes.
You've said that one of the biggest benefits, unbeknownst to you before this happened, was once you decided, okay, I'm going to be in this long-term committed relationship and get married to your wife, you're like, all of that, like, I don't have to worry about all this shit anymore. Like these people who go around and they're chasing those feelings that we're talking about, right? You spend so much time worrying about all of this. But once you've committed to somebody, you're in a committed, loving relationship, there's less anxiety around all these other parts of your life. You can just worry about other stuff, worry about other shit. Worry about your job, worry about building a safe community for other people. All these downstream societal effects that you get start from that secure base that you have with another person.
Very true. Very true.
Anything to say to that so far?
Yeah,
you got nothing, do you?
Wow, little shit talking coming from the pro love side of the table.
There's some of these downstream effects too. Stable relationships are linked to better career achievement.
Yeah.
You make more money.
Also true.
You get promoted more often. You have higher job satisfaction too. It helps when the person at home is supportive of you in your role. That's one of the things. So yes, the relationship has to be happy, and that will come up over and over as a theme.
You could also argue too that long-term relationships are a civilizing force on men, particularly young men.
Particularly on men, yes.
Like when you look at the benefits of marriage, men benefit more than women, and particularly young men benefit the most. And it's, if you look at societies where things get a little bit hairy and people start rioting in the streets, or there's like political revolutions or civil wars, it's typically lots and lots and lots of unmarried, uneducated young men with few opportunities. I mean, we were even joking about this yesterday, about how before I met my wife, I was like a fucking barbarian.
Yeah.
Like in like now too, when she goes back to Brazil and I'm like left home for 3 weeks, like, dude, I don't know what happens to me. I turn into a caveman. I'm like grunting, and I like forget the shower, and my dirty clothes are fucking everywhere, and I can't feed myself. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. And the higher relationship quality in marriage, the research consistently shows that married adults, they just report higher relationship satisfaction quality across multiple dimensions, even over cohabiting partners, okay? So when you've actually made that like, I love you commitment and we're gonna do this and get married, you even get a boost of satisfaction out of that. I know that's not across the board. There's problems with this. We'll get into those. I get that, but it is possible. And that is like probably the most secure base from which you can build a life and therefore build a community and build a society based off of that, through that just dyadic pair and pair bonding with one other person. Married couples too, over cohabitating couples, they 12% more likely to report relationship satisfaction, 26% more likely to report high stability throughout their life, not just in their relationship, and 15% more likely to report feelings of higher commitment and dedication to another person.
Yeah, but is that correlation or causation?
Fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Because I would argue more stable, more committed people are more likely to get married.
Right. I get that. Okay. I'll just leave you with this too. There are a lot of, you're like, oh, you know, the love wanes over time and all of that. There's actually a lot of research suggesting that no, that's not necessarily the case for a very significant proportion of people. Actually, satisfaction, relationship, and life satisfaction remains relatively stable for long periods of time in people who do get married and commit to each other over the long haul. Yes, it waxes and wanes. There's probably some, variation around the mean. I get that.
Yep.
But longer term, people do report that their satisfaction with their partner, with their relationship, and with their life in general remains relatively stable over time.
Okay. Are you done?
Sure.
Okay, good.
For now. Yeah.
Because I will begin by saying that I don't disagree with anything you said.
Okay.
I think it's well researched, prairie voles, well done.
Right.
You gotta get the prairie voles. If you're going to talk about monogamy,
yeah.
you gotta get the prairie voles in there.
You do. They're super cute too, Mark.
Are they?
They are.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said.
Okay.
I will make a key distinction though.
Okay.
That I think is absolutely cataclysmic to your case, sir.
Okay.
And that is everything you're talking about is marriage. It's the result of marriage. It's a result of that explicit commitment to another person.
Okay.
I would argue that marriage is quite different than love. And I actually have history on my side on this one because for the vast majority of human history, love and marriage were not associated with one another. If you go as far back as the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Romans, romantic love was something to be cautious about. It was something to worry about. Why? Because it made you make terrible decisions. For the vast majority of human history, marriage was arranged. It was negotiated between families. It was discussed between political alliances. People would marry their cousins in vast quantities. Why? To mitigate social, economic, and political risk. So marriage, by and large, was never about love. I mean, even once you get into the Middle Ages, there was copious amounts of advice that was being handed down from the kings and the lords and the church, advising parents, don't let your kids marry for love. At the time, Western Europe was the only place in the world that people actually had some agency in choosing who that they could marry, and that was due to a bunch of institutions and laws that the Catholic Church passed. And so it became this source of anxiety for parents and families of like, oh God, what if little Johnny decides to marry little Susie because he's in love with her? That's going to be horrible for our family's future. No, we got to make sure that Johnny marries his cousin over here, which actually cousin marriage wasn't allowed in Europe either. But we have to make sure that Johnny marries Cindy over here because that's much better for our family's future. And so there you see this tension throughout most of human history where love had nothing to do with it. It was never part of the equation. And not only was it not part of the equation, it was a risk to the equation. Most of us today, we think of Romeo and Juliet as the ultimate love story. People don't realize that contemporaries of Shakespeare at the time, when they went to see Romeo and Juliet, when it premiered, they saw it as a cautionary tale. It reaffirmed their belief of like, oh my God, don't let your fucking teenager fall in love with somebody. Because this is what's going to happen to you.
Sure.
So it really wasn't until the 19th century with the Romantic movement in Western Europe that you get this notion of that you should marry the person that you're in love with. That because we have agency and because we get to choose the life that we have, why not maximize our life to be as happy as possible? This was a new and revolutionary idea in the 19th century, and it began with a lot of the moral philosophy that came out of England with Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, and then it bled over into the Romantic movement with people like Goethe, and it eventually trickled its way down into the culture, where people started looking for marriage partners based on who they love. It's funny because if I remember in high school, I read Jane Eyre and I thought it was the most boring fucking book in the world. I'm like, this is like just the most cliche love story ever. And what I realized at the time, it was so transgressive. This idea that you would marry for love or pursue somebody out of love rather than the best status or opportunity for your family or for what your parents would approve. It was completely transgressive at the time. So it is something that we take for granted today, but it is love and marriage are a very recent pairing. And I think if you could make the argument that maybe it's too high of a bar. If you look at countries in the world that have arranged marriages, a place like India, they have some of the lowest divorce rates in the world as well. And I think a lot of that has to do simply with expectation. There's just an understanding of like, yeah, my spouse isn't supposed to satisfy all of my emotional needs. By the way, I'm not saying we implement arranged marriage and marry people for economic reasons. I'm just saying that like these are two very different institutions.
That's fair.
And for most of human history, they were separate in most people's minds. You called love a social infrastructure. And by love, I think you mean marriage primarily. Marriage is also a market. Dating is a market. It's something that you come to with a certain amount of value.
Okay.
And you try to find maximize the most amount of value you can get out of it as well. All the things that you described, the social and economic stability, a lot of that is a function of the value of the partners that are put together. Now, I would argue that if dating is a market, and it is to a certain extent, in the dating episode, we talked about how much attraction is driven by perceived status, how much of it is driven by how much you think the person is going to add to your life,
sure.
Right? It's completely natural and human. Well, if you look at it that way, then you have to ask yourself, how is love influencing how this market functions, right? Like if you have people who are trying to make decisions in a market and their decision-making is constantly getting hijacked and blocked by this like crazy motivation or drive, they're constantly rationalizing all these reasons to be with somebody who, by all accounts, is probably not the right person for them to be with. It's hard for a market to function efficiently that way. I would add on top of that, what we are experiencing, the so-called dating crisis that we're in the midst of today, is actually kind of an outcrop of this issue, right? Because what happens when you get on a dating app, you're primarily thinking, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're probably looking for status indicators, right? How good looking is the person? How much money are they making? How popular are they? What school did they go to? All of these status indicators. Yet you're showing up to the date expecting to be swept off your feet and in love. And so, of course, you end up with a population that is constantly frustrated because you have infrastructure and a dating market infrastructure that has been optimized for status matching, but the population at large, the culture at large, still sees dating and marriage through the lens of love. Now, I'm not saying that we should necessarily go back to marrying for money and being very
political reasons
and alliances and all that. I'm just saying that like we have to be very honest about what's going on here.
That's fair.
And in fact, like when you look at research, it's interesting. So recently, a number of researchers have actually tried to like use AI to do matchmaking. So they have like taken people and figured out all these variables about who they are as a person and what they're interested in. They've tried to run machine learning on all those factors to predict which single people are going to hit it off and become attracted or fall in love with each other, and they can't do it. And the conclusion they eventually came to is that love emerges in the interaction itself. You can't predict when it's going to be there and when it's not going to be there. And so I would just argue that our poor understanding of love, dating, marriage, how it all actually functions, has been leading people to a lot of disappointment. And I would say that the overestimation of love, this idea that your ideal partner should satisfy all of your status-driven desires, satisfy all of your economic and social needs, and satisfy all of your emotional needs on top of that, and sweep you off your feet and be your Prince Charming or your whatever Sleeping Beauty. It's completely unreasonable, and something has to give somewhere. And when you look back across the vast history of human civilization, the thing that is given is the love. And you've been talking about commitment and the importance of commitment, how it makes people's lives better, how marriage makes people's lives better. I agree with all that. I've experienced it myself. But there's to a certain degree, I would argue, the commitment comes first, the love comes second. And I think for whatever reason, our culture and our society, we've got it backwards. We think love hits you like a fucking lightning bolt, and then you commit to that person. And I would call that framing into question entirely.
Okay. That I don't disagree with that last point you made. Okay. And I'm not saying that love should be the only thing that dictates who you get into a relationship with or spend your life with or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all.
So we both agree that John Lennon was a dumbass.
Yes, I will. Okay, I will agree with that. Love, all you need is love is not.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
I agree with that.
By the way, John Lennon, not the greatest track record with
No.
with women.
No.
Should be noted.
Yes, very much so. I would agree with that. Like, love should not be the sole motivating force for you to get into a relationship, stay in a relationship, anything like that. Of course.
Yeah.
And I also agree too that commitment could actually precede the feelings of love that you have, and often do.
Yeah.
Look at the statistics for arranged marriages, say in India or any other places where they have arranged marriages. They're usually, if not about the same satisfaction within the relationship, or better sometimes too, than compared to other societies that don't have arranged marriages. Sure.
Yeah.
I get that. What I am saying though is that love, it deepens that relationship to the point where all of those downstream effects I was talking about at a societal level, actually there's a stronger glue there. And I think love is part of that, a big part of that.
Yeah.
That attachment you have to another person, that commitment, it's fueled that you, like you said, love is a motivational system, right?
Yep.
A lot of that commitment, a lot of that kind of like social glue that we have, that is fueled by an attachment to another person that's underpinned by love.
Drew, we're getting too nuanced here. We're supposed to be like those guys on cable TV who are just screaming at each other. And
I'll push back on one other little thing then before we wrap this up.
Okay.
Then, okay, which is, yes, the modern dating market, as you called it,
yes,
it is broken.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. It's garbage. It's hot garbage right now. That doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater here, though. Okay, just like the housing market is broken too. Should we all just give up on that?
On homes?
On homes
that's
and all of that?
point.
Okay,
That's a good
so
point. Yeah.
yes, the modern dating market is broken. Yes, we probably look at it, I would argue, we look at it too much like a market, maybe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Although it is, like there's a reality around it that you're trying to get the best bang for your buck out of this quote unquote market.
No pun intended.
Right. But we don't, just because that's broken doesn't mean it can't be worked on and fixed, and we can't address some of those issues too.
Okay. Always the optimist, Drew.
All right.
Always the optimist.
All
All right. What's your next point?
Love and happiness, Mark.
Oh, those they never happen together, do they?
Well, come on. There's a lot of nuance in this, and yes, I know.
I'm being facetious, by the way. Love and happiness are probably like the two most strongly correlated things. But anyway, I'm stealing your point.
We've all heard about the loneliness crisis.
Yes.
Right. There's some debate as to like how long this has actually been going on. People have been lonely all throughout human history, obviously, right? But back in the like late 2000s, early 2010s, there were those studies that came out that said, social isolation can be as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, basically a pack of cigarettes a day for your physical health, not just your mental health, your actual physical health. You don't live as long. You have increased heart rate or heart disease incidences, cancers, all of that. They've associated with chronic loneliness or chronic social isolation, depression, anxiety, cognitive decline too. So higher rates of like Alzheimer's.
But isn't that just an argument for friendship?
Friendship is part of it. Okay.
Yep.
That is part of it. I've thought a lot about this too, because, I'm real big on like friends take up a bigger part of my social life than romantic partners generally have. In my adult life, they have anyway. I've thought a lot about that. And yes, they're great. The thing is about a romantic partner, there's certain things they can provide that friends can't, not just sex, Mark. Okay. I just saw you looking at me.
Why are you assuming that's where I'm going?
Yeah, I mean, you can.
It's funny because I'm agreeing with you, and I was not thinking about sex.
Yeah. There's just certain things. There's a level of intimacy, and that you only get with your romantic partners that you can't get through friendship. The Harvard study on happiness, they sometimes call it. It's actually called the Harvard study on adult development. Okay, but they often call it the Harvard happiness study. So it's that one that's gone all the way back to, I think, was it the 20s or 30s?
Late 1930s, yeah.
Late 1930s. They started then. They're still going to today.
Started with a graduating class of senior men from Harvard, and then they started tracking them every single year for 70
until
years.
they died. Yeah, basically
until they
and then
died.
They started adding more cohorts along the way.
Yeah.
It's this huge study. It's still ongoing. They look at every single factor they can find, and then they go in and they comb through the data this way, right? Some of the things that have come out of that, spending time with a loving partner predicts day-to-day happiness better than your physical health habits. Okay. It doesn't like exercising, eating right, getting good sleep, all of that. If you spend time with somebody that you love, on a daily basis, more or less, is a stronger predictor of your happiness than not. Okay. And it's not just about like marriage and commitment, like we talked about. It's not just about that. The quality of the relationship really matters here. Emotional warmth from close partners is one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging. So it's not just that you're married. It's not just that you have somebody else, a warm body around. It's that quality and the love that you feel with the other person actually predicts physical health, like on a very, very long time horizon. Okay. Spousal support is another one that it buffers against age-related decline. So things like dementia, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. And you just see an overall boost in happiness too. If spending time with a supportive, emotionally warm person that you feel connected with. All of those things flow from like this pair bonding love experience that we have.
Love.
Okay.
Say it true.
No, not
say
all.
It true.
I'm not going to say all you need is love. That's not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying.
Love.
Yes. Also too, the flip side of that.
Yeah.
Loving somebody makes you vulnerable. It makes you, it opens you up to heartache and despair and all of those things. Yes, you are opening yourself up to that. That absolutely means you can be hurt. I get that. Okay. But just like you've always said, Mark, you can't have the benefits without the costs, right? You have to risk something. Meaning only comes from risking something.
Yeah.
This is something as I've gotten older, because for the longest time I was just like, I got my friends and I can date around here and there.
Yeah.
And all of this. The thing that over the last few years that I've really realized is like, oh, that's the whole point. The whole point is that you can get hurt, that this will hurt at some point. And that's what makes it more meaningful. And that's why you do all this crazy shit even too, is because it's kind of worth it in the end. There's a lot of people who, especially today, they're just like, I'm not doing this. There's these insane statistics where people are just dropping out of the dating market altogether. People under 30, it's something that only like 40% of people are even looking for a relationship. 40% of single people under 30 right now are even looking for a relationship. Wow. This is, in some studies, that's what they show, in some pockets at least. That's insane.
Yes.
And I think a lot of what that is they're saying, I don't need anyone. What they're saying is I'm afraid to need anyone.
Yeah.
And I get it. You're protected and, you're not putting yourself out there and you're not vulnerable to heartache, and fine. I get that. That's not like freedom though. That's just, you're just defending yourself.
Yeah.
And you're not actually engaging with the world. That requires some risk.
Yeah.
That requires putting yourself out there and maybe getting your heart broke a little bit. People see all the risks. They don't do the proper cost benefit analysis here though.
Right.
Because the upside is so huge.
Yep.
Not just all the health benefits that I just went through, but just life satisfaction in general too. It's there. Yes, it takes work. Absolutely, it takes work.
But everything good takes work.
Everything good takes work. Absolutely. Even long-term durable patterns of a dysfunction in your relationships, those aren't even like, a lot of people are like, well, this just isn't for me. There's some people who, yes, this works for, but it's not for me because obviously over and over again, I'm raising my hand here too, because it was like over and over again, this relationships, long-term committed stuff, not for me. Even that though, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
Yeah.
You can work on these things. There's been some really good research coming out, like couples therapy is actually very, very effective. Something like 70% of people who do it say they've gotten some benefit out of it, at least, if not saved their entire marriage for it. If you stick with it long enough, something like 20, 30 sessions, most people say that they've resolved the issues that they went in to address. It's actually very, very effective. So it's not that you can't learn these skills. Yes, there's problems. Yes, love can cause a lot of problems. And yes, you can love the wrong person, or yes, you can get into very, very toxic relationships.
Yep.
And it can really fuck your life up.
Yep.
But you can also learn not to do all of those shitty things to each other, right?
Yeah.
That's a very, very real possibility. People do it all the time. Growth really is possible in this area, and it can make you happier.
I don't disagree with that. Question though, if emotional warmth from a partner predicts healthiness and happiness better than, say, money or IQ or all these other things.
Which is also found, yes.
Yeah. Why do we spend so much more time optimizing for our careers than our relationships?
Because I think it goes back to that. We're afraid. Relationships, a loving, committed relationship is an incredibly vulnerable thing to be in, like I just said. And it's a lot easier to say, well, if I just make some money, then I'll be happier.
Yeah.
If I just achieve these things and get this outside validation from usually strangers, then hey, I'll be happier. That's
Yeah.
why I think we do that. I think it's a big distraction. It's a big hand wave.
I've also noticed too, I've observed in people that they see that, like, because I think at this point in our generation, like most people or most smart people who think about this stuff kind of intuitively understand that, you got to work on yourself to have a good relationship. Basically, it's, you want to make yourself as healthy and whole as possible before you jump into a really serious long-term committed relationship. But what I've observed is that a lot of people, I think, either take that too far, or again, there's that kind of status love mismatch going on where they are working so hard on their career. They're building up skills and fitness and different experiences so that when they finally do meet their partner, they're going to be this like well-rounded, interesting person who's going to have a lot going on. But the problem is that those things don't predict chemistry. They don't predict the spark. They don't predict the love happening, right? Yeah. Like it's so many people, I think, use that as a subtle form of avoidance.
Yes.
It's like a form of productive procrastination, right? It's like, oh, I'm just going to take another year and like work on my career a little bit more. Then I'll be ready to find my partner or whatever. And then before they know it, they're like 35 or 40. They haven't met enough people. They don't know what they like. They don't know who they're compatible with or who they have good chemistry with. And so they like go on all these dates and they're just confused of like, why is nothing happening?
What we've found in attachment science too, if you're an insecure attachment style, if you're avoidant or anxious or disorganized, whatever it is, what's the best way to fix that? It's not therapy, actually. It's being in a healthy relationship with either a secure person or somebody who at least is aware of what's going on and is helping.
Yeah.
You can both grow together.
Yes.
So it's not about like getting yourself fixed first.
Yep.
And I'm not saying a relationship can fix you. I'm saying it's a space where two people can grow in a way that helps them heal.
Yeah. I'm going to get in my rebuttal here in a second, and we're going to land in the same spot. I think I'm going to end up making the same argument you're making right now, but I'm going to come at it from completely the opposite side. So you point out that love drives happiness, that it is the strongest correlate of life satisfaction.
Yes, I put it way up there.
Yeah, it's way up there. Definitely top 3, potentially top 1. I would argue that love doesn't necessarily drive happiness. Love amplifies whatever the underlying relationship already is. So if the relationship is healthy and happy, the love is going to 10x that. But if the relationship is unhealthy and miserable, then the love is going to 10x that. So it's love itself is not driving the joy and happiness. Love is just amplifying whatever emotion is already there.
Okay.
And by the way, there's a finding that also came from the Harvard study that backs this up. So it found that relationship quality actually matters more than relationship status. Low quality relationships or unhappy marriages are not better than no marriage. They're actually worse than having no marriage. So you're better off being single than being in an awful, miserable,
definitely
horrible relationship.
Yes.
But it's even worse than that because, as I laid out at the top of the show, our romantic love behaves in our brain very much in the same way as like a chemical addiction or like a gambling addiction. And what drives more addiction? Well, intermittent reinforcement. If you look at the science behind like what makes gambling so addictive or what makes video games so addictive, it's that there is a endless series of unpredictable rewards. Like that seems to be kind of the formula of like what gets people hooked on a certain activity or a certain behavior is that it's going to be
that's variable reward schedule. Yeah,
exactly. It's going to be very satisfying at different unpredictable times. And what is an unstable relationship? It's something that's incredibly satisfying at very unpredictable times.
Machine, yeah.
It is a slot machine.
Sure.
And today it comes up all red and you lose all your money, but tomorrow you might hit the jackpot. And if you have a mind that's susceptible to that, you can easily fall prey to it. And so there's kind of this sick pressure within our own brains, which is that the exact thing that makes an unhealthy relationship unhealthy is also what makes it more addictive and more consuming, which is the irony, right? Like it's just anecdotally, I've noticed that people who are actually happy in their relationships they don't really talk about themselves.
Yeah.
They don't talk about the relationship.
Yeah.
They don't really have anything to say because they're fucking happy.
Mm-hmm.
But the people there are certain people that are like always posting online about themselves or always posting online about each other. They're always talking about, oh, she's so amazing. Oh my God, he's my dream man, and like all this stuff.
And they want to know all about your relationships too.
Yeah, and it's funny because whenever my wife and I meet a couple like that, we're like, they're gonna get divorced. Like 100% chance they're gonna get divorced.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that it's like if you have like a rich person doesn't have to tell people he's rich.
Right, sure. A confident person doesn't go around saying how confident they are.
A happy
Yeah.
couple doesn't have to go telling everybody how happy
Fair.
they are. The squeaky wheel makes the most noise. And
Okay. Are you kind of making the argument to, how people, so, somewhere between 40 and 60% of marriages fall apart depending on demographics and all. There's a lot of nuance to that number, so don't quote me on that. But are you saying so that, there is this huge kind of idea out there right now where a lot of people are just like, well, the odds are against me, so I'm just not even going to, again, we're not necessarily talking about marriage, but this is trickling down now into I'm just not even going to date.
so this is where I come around and I agree with your final point, which is that I do think that perhaps we are in a world where we are too aware of these dynamics. And I do think young people, they're so aware. They grew up in therapy culture. They grew up learning about all this stuff. They grew up learning about self-esteem and protecting themselves and, not settling and all this stuff. And so I feel like they kind of intuitively understand that like, well, being in a fucked up relationship is going to be worse than being by myself. And if I can just be happy by myself, then like what, I don't have to worry about anything. So I do think there's like a little bit of logic behind it, but to your point, I do think the risk reward is off. The thing that they're missing, which you're correct about, is that the way to get better relationships is to be in relationship. It's like anything else. The only way, I guess the fallacy here is what we talked about just a few minutes ago of like the people who are like, I'm going to get my life together. I'm going to be a happy whole person on my own. Then I'll be ready to date and be in relationships. And that can only take you so far. I mean, there's a minimum level of kind of self-sufficiency and independence that you need to get to. So it's like if you're still living in mom's basement and don't have a job, like, okay, go get a job.
Obviously, right.
Go get your own place. If you still don't, if you don't have like a social, you don't have any friends and you don't have any money, like, okay, get some money, get some friends. But once you're kind of at a baseline functionality, optimizing yourself anymore isn't going to drive a ton of results. Like you do need to get out there and start having these experiences in relationships because that is how you get better at relationships. Is you have a couple bad relationships, you learn from them. You learn where you got tricked. Like it comes back to the con man, right? Your brain is a con man. It's tricking you into falling in love with these people. And so you need to learn where the tricks are. You need to learn like what the games your brain is playing with you so that you don't play them next time. So that you spot them and you're like, oh, I remember the last time I fell for a girl like that.
Okay.
Did not end well.
That I agree with very much. Yes. Okay.
So yes, you do need to get out there and start having these experiences. And yes, the risk of toxic relationships is very real, especially if you get a really bad relationship. Like, yeah, it can kind of fuck you up for a while. So like it is a real risk. There are real repercussions, but the alternative is just bad. So you might as well get into the game, start getting better at it, start learning about yourself, start learning about the sort of partners you attract, and try to improve because there is no other way to improve it. Like I think one of the startling or surprising things about this is that just knowing all this stuff doesn't really inoculate you to it. There's actually like,
can vouch. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, speaking from personal experience, speaking from like watching Friends, but I mean, it's just, there's actually, have you ever read about like Tolstoy and his wife?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, it's so fucked up. So Tolstoy wrote Anna Karenina, arguably like the best romance novel ever written, one of the most famous books ever written. And his marriage with his wife was like so contentious, so toxic, so fucked up. So Tolstoy was a bit of a weird. I mean,
yes, he's an outlier. I get that.
He's an outlier. I want to like preface this by saying that like I'm a Tolstoy fanboy. I personally think he's like maybe the greatest novelist who's ever lived. That dude was a little bit crazy. He was very idealistic in his personal life. So when he got engaged to his wife, the night before their wedding, he handed her all of his diaries and journals because he felt like she should know everything about him. What she didn't realize is that his diaries and journals documented in explicit detail every prostitute he had gone to, every gambling debt he had, every like terrible thing he had done to anybody. And so she spent the whole night before her wedding weeping about the guy she was about to marry.
At least he's honest.
At least he's honest. At least, hey, there are worse problems, I guess. They went ahead with the marriage, and from day one, they were married for 48 years. From day one, it was highly contentious, highly toxic. They were both incredibly manipulative towards each other. They intermingled every aspect of their lives. She edited and rewrote War and Peace for him. He was like, would demand full totalitarian control over the household. They would manipulate each other, backstab each other, turn their kids against each other. They would write in their diaries awful shit about each other. And then they discovered that they were both sneaking into each other's offices and reading each other's diaries. So then they started writing in their diaries about each other so that the other one would read it, and manipulating each other through their diary entries. It was just a whole fucking mess.
That is another level of toxic.
It's another level of toxic, for sure.
Wow. Okay.
Finally. So late in Tolstoy's life, he had a pretty massive spiritual awakening, a religious conversion. By the way, he had become this rich and famous, probably the most famous living author in the world. And he had decided at like the ripe age of, I think, 75, that he wanted to give away all of his money and possessions to the needy and poor and become a peasant in the countryside. He had 8 kids.
Yeah.
Obviously, his wife was like, fuck no, dude, get back to work. She was so afraid that he was going to change a will and write a new will to like give away all their possessions to the church, that she would sleep in his office, and she like would not leave his side. It drove him so crazy that he finally ran away in the middle of the night when he was 80 years old, contracted pneumonia, and proceeded to die a week later. So,
okay, that's a dramatic example.
All of this is to say,
I get it.
The man who wrote Anna Karenina,
yes,
who arguably wrote the most powerful and poignant passages about love, some of the most powerful and poignant passages about love ever written, was an absolute disaster in his marriage and his personal life.
And just like we mentioned, John Lennon, same thing.
Yes.
Okay, I get that.
Complete mess. I get that. So,
but there's going to be a certain person that hears that story and say like, see, it's just not even worth it. And it's the same type of person, or it's the same argument that's made with a lot of people who are like, oh, the government just can't do anything right, therefore we shouldn't have a government. It's like, no, what you're arguing for is better government.
Yes.
What you're actually arguing for is better relationship skills, better skills where you can express and receive love.
Yes. And I 100% agree with you. And the cautionary tale of Tolstoy is not that you shouldn't get married. It is that just because you intellectually understand this stuff doesn't mean you're good at it.
Okay.
It's like reading 10 books about basketball and then thinking you can go play in the NBA.
Right.
Like
you're now a 3-point shooter.
Yeah, you have to go play basketball.
Right.
There's no other way to do it.
That I agree with.
So we've established that your brain is a bit of a con man. We've established that a terrible relationship is, from a mental health, physical health point of view, worse than no relationship. My final argument against love is that romantic love in particular, that initial limerence, that initial sweep you off your feet, it is more likely to happen with somebody who is completely toxic for you. This is the unfortunate truth, is that healthy love tends to be a little bit boring. That doesn't mean that it doesn't feel amazing, that it's not great, that it isn't a beautiful thing. It's just a little bit boring. And the people who are exciting, who keep you awake at night because you can't stop thinking about them, chances are they're pretty fucking toxic. So there's a thing called the dark triad, which is it's 3 personality traits that are highly interrelated, and they basically predict all antisocial behavior. So narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. I think people are pretty familiar with narcissism and psychopathy, or being a psychopath. Machiavellianism is basically, it's being manipulative. It's basically like being scheming and playing games with people to like get a one-up on them. It turns out that people who are high in dark triad traits are extremely magnetic, especially upon the first impression. They are generally rated as more attractive, more confident, more desirable, and achieve far more short-term mating success. It's actually like the dark triad is, it's really fucked up. It's a little bit of like a sore spot for me because, you know, back when I was in the men's dating advice industry, there was a small cohort of that industry, which at the time was known as the manosphere. It is since now blown up and is mostly popularized by Andrew Tate. But the manosphere guys they looked at this research result, the fact that dark triad men in particular come off as more confident, more sexually attractive, and have more short-term mating success. As a result, they celebrated it. They said, this is the behavior that we should be
That's the goal.
emulating. We should adopt dark triad traits as much as possible, which is a terrible fucking idea because dark triad people are miserable people. So it is actually completely self-defeating. But the point for all of us is that the charm is real, the seduction is real, and what follows is also, unfortunately, often very real. The other point I want to make around this is that intense chemistry is often driven not by genuine compatibility or genuine admiration for the other person. If you are experiencing extremely intense chemistry with somebody, sexual, romantic chemistry with somebody upon first meeting them, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be driven by some sort of trauma-induced compensation. There's some deep childhood wound that this person has like somehow tapped into, whether through their personality or the way they talk to you or the way they look or whatever it is. And it's that overwhelming response of emotion and obsession over this person is often driven by that childhood wound that needs to heal. That it's like it is this person is somehow mapped onto that childhood wound, and you are basically playing out the same pattern with them individually. I actually went through an experience like this in college. It was absolutely crazy. I sat next to a girl in the computer lab one day. It started talking to her, somehow got talking about music, and there was just this like intense magnetic attraction that up to that point in my life I had never felt. Like it was so intense. Like I just couldn't stop staring at her, couldn't stop talking, like was like, holy shit, this girl is amazing. We ended up talking the whole day in the computer lab. I invited her to dinner. We went to dinner. She had a boyfriend for 5 years. I was dating another girl. By that night, we were like hooking up we basically spent a week straight together. We were completely obsessed with each other, like could not physically be in a different room. And I'll let you guess how this ended.
Well, yeah. I've seen that movie before.
How many days do you think it lasted?
Right,
You know, I think it made it to like day 6, maybe. It was, in hindsight, I mean, I didn't understand what was happening at the time. I honestly thought I had just met the love of my life. And I think she thought the same thing. And what ended up happening is that we were kind of caught in this whirlwind of fantasy and delusion. And eventually you spend enough time with a person, you start seeing all of the nitty gritty details of them. You start seeing the reality of who they are. Some of these things start to become impossible to ignore. And then reality comes crashing in. And basically it's like the higher the high of that initial romantic dizziness, the harder the crash when it comes. And so she and I just ended up in these like screaming arguments over really stupid stuff. And I think it's just because we had invested so much of ourselves and put so much expectation on a relationship that had only lasted like 5 days and had no understanding of like the fact that we're actually dealing with a real human being, an individual on the other side. So yeah, it came apart, and I actually don't think I ever like talked to her or saw her again after that. So it's like, I actually had a friend who was also a dating coach back in the dating advice industry, and he had a saying. He used to say, the brighter the candle burns, the faster it goes out. And
yeah, okay. Yes.
Definitely true.
Sure.
my last point, and then I'll kind of wrap up with a meta point. But so love bombing. Love bombing is when somebody just expresses so much attraction for you so quickly. It's often coupled with promises of long-term commitment, affection. It's like gifts. It's just like, it's a lot. Yeah. It's like a tidal wave of attention and affection. And generally the person who's love bombing you, like, they do seem to genuinely have intentions of spending the rest of their lives with you. It's funny because when you look at the research on attraction, it's just a reminder of like how selfish people are. Because one of like the driving things about attraction is just somebody who's really into you. Like, it's, if somebody's really into you, you're like, that's a pretty smart person.
This is one way to get me interested in you, is to be interested. Yeah, exactly. I have a very, very flimsy ego that can be easily manipulated. 100% agree.
I mean, it's not the only thing,
obviously,
obviously, and it's not even like the biggest factor. But it is funny that we tend to be attracted to people who are attracted to us. Right. Like, it's just we're a little egocentric in that way. Love bombing really leverages this mechanism, especially in insecure people, right? Because if you're insecure, you're kind of desperate for people to be interested in you. And so when you get love bombed, it just feels like, oh my God, it's like a life preserver in an ocean of despair. The problem is that love bombing is not coming from a very genuine place. It is also coming from a very toxic place. It's coming from a place of inadequacy. And unfortunately, a lot of dark triad people will intentionally use love bombing as a tactic to manipulate people into getting what they want. Coincidentally, Andrew Tate, his whole method that he sells to young men is to essentially love bomb young women. And love bombing, it's the sort of thing that it works. We talked about in the dating episode how insecurity attracts insecurity and security attracts security. Love bombing only works on highly insecure people. Like, it's really, if you're desperate for affection, if you are starved for validation, then a love bomb is going to feel like a godsend. Yeah. Whereas if you are a pretty secure, high self-esteem individual, guy starts love bombing you, your first thought's going to be like, what's wrong with him?
Right. Yeah. He's compensating for something.
He's definitely like, he's a little bit unstable. The point of all of this is that, again, that romantic love, that initial limerence, we're all susceptible to it.
Yes.
We've all got this con man who's kind of tricking us in our brains. And not only are we susceptible to it, but we're most susceptible to the most toxic people. And it is actually the most destabilizing behaviors and traits in people are the things that are the most intoxicating and exciting and romantic. And as we discussed in my rebuttal to your last argument, it is getting caught in one of those toxic cycles in a really toxic relationship. It can actually make you worse off than just being alone. And so I do think people are right to be hesitant, to be skeptical. But I also do think that they should be actively looking for a relationship and partner. But it comes back to, what are you prioritizing? How are you filtering people? And I just think love as a filtering mechanism, you have to be very, very, very careful.
Fair. Okay. A couple of things I want to point out. One of them, with the college girlfriend story you had.
Yeah.
You were in college. You were young. You were 20, 21 maybe?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. Sure. That, I mean.
By the way, I would not take that experience back.
Okay.
It was
there we go.
A shit show.
Point for Drew.
Yeah. It was an absolute shit show. It completely disrupted my life, and I'm sure it disrupted her life far more than it disrupted mine, because she was the one who was in a very long-term committed relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't regret it.
Okay. My point is, though, that you were young, and yes, we do dumb things when you're young. There's more going on than just like love overtaking us. We're just not good at emotional regulation at that point either. So that's one point I'm going to make, is that you can actually learn to avoid those relationships, and hopefully you do. I feel like I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older too. Another thing, I guess you kind of alluded to it, but yes, it is very, very common for like anxious attachment types to get with avoidant attachment types.
Correct.
You're right. That's the people who really aren't good for us for some cruel reason, we just tend to get with these people. Like you said, it's typically like a childhood wound of some kind that we're strangely trying to figure out with this. And we see this in this other person, hoping that they can fix it.
Yep.
And it just turns out they're the exact wrong person to fix that. Totally agree with that. That happens all the time. But just because our initial attraction is often flawed, just because our first impressions are usually not right, or they're not the best for us, or whatever it is, that doesn't mean, again, we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think what you're talking about is that fairy tale kind of infatuation.
Yep.
Of course, that's not sustainable.
Yep.
Of course, the tale of Romeo and Juliet is real, and the lesson from it is real, which is young, dumb love needs to be tempered.
Gets people killed.
Yeah, right. You end up drinking hemlock, right?
Yes.
You mentioned this. You said that what actual love often looks like is more boring. And that wasn't really something I think I figured out until the last few years either. So in my current relationship now, when we first started dating, I was like, does she even I don't think she likes me. I didn't think she liked me.
Yeah.
Because I've usually been the avoidant one in so many of my adult relationships. And I've usually been with a more anxious person, or at least that's how it ends up shaping out. And then, I get this constant, there's always this the anxious person is always kind of like, they're the ones keeping in contact with me. They're the ones trying to push things along. They're the ones, do you like me? What I thought were demands they were putting on me, all of these things, right? Yeah. This relationship that I'm in now, that didn't happen. She's a pretty secure person, and it didn't happen. I'm just like, does she like me? I have no idea what's going on. And it wasn't until the relationship progressed far enough that I kind of brought that up, and I'm like, I didn't think you really liked me. And she's like, this gets to the point about over therapizing thing. It's a little bit like I brought up, I'm like, yeah, I've, historically been pretty avoidant. And she was a little bit taken back by that, like a little bit like, I better watch out because I've been in these situations before. I'm fairly secure, but avoidant people, I'm attracted to them just like a lot of people are. And so she wanted to watch out for that. But when we finally did have this honest, open conversation about it, it was like, oh, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. It's boring.
Yes.
And so I do agree that we put way too much emphasis on that early initial fairy tale infatuation phase. And that gets all the rom-coms from the 90s and 2000s, blew it way out of proportion and romanticized it way too much. I definitely agree with that. But there's a lot of research that shows what actually does work and does predict success. And again, those are skills you can practice. Those are things I'm living proof of this.
Yeah.
I was terrible at this. And I just thought I got caught in that phase where it was chasing that high. Yeah. It was chasing that cocaine addiction, as you called it, of another person. But you can, over time, I think we just get better at this as we get older. And there's just a whole suite of predictors of success that aren't personality based, actually. It's not like a compatibility necessary thing. It's these behaviors that you can practice and you can cultivate in yourself. So there was this one meta-analysis. It was 43 different studies on the relationship success, and they found 4 big predictors of relationship satisfaction. Okay. One of them was perceived partner commitment. Okay, so how much do you think your partner is actually in this with you, right? Just appreciation for the other person. Sexual satisfaction was up there too, and then low conflict. The master variable kind of in all of this, though, was partner responsiveness. And this is something I had to learn. Again, it can be learned. Yeah. You can learn this.
Yes.
So it's not just that you have these awful behaviors coming from somebody else with a dark triad or anything like that. Yes, that's part of it. Obviously, screen those people out. But just being able to cultivate some sort of responsiveness with your partner. And this is what I kind of had to learn as an avoidant person. Yeah. When you have somebody who might be a little more anxious or prone to anxiety, it doesn't take a whole lot.
Yes.
It does not take a whole lot. When they come to you, instead of looking at them as demands, you're like, oh, I need to be responsive to this. And same to them too. So there's a mutual responsiveness that really predicts a lot of relationship success and satisfaction. And that's what really, I think, underpins love more than anything, is a responsiveness. You're responsive to somebody. No, you're not responsible for their happiness or anything like that, but you are responsive to them. Yeah. And so it's not about these personality traits. It's not about you're attracting the wrong person. It's just, you don't have the skills for it. You haven't developed the experience and the skills. This is why young people fall for all the wrong people for them. It's because they haven't developed those skills yet. And we haven't taught them very well either in our culture and society.
Yeah.
Even narcissists, they can only fake empathy for so long, and then it does fall off the tracks, sure. But if you can train yourself to notice that and focus more on those responsive behaviors within a relationship, that can predict a lot more success.
The responsiveness thing overlaps really well too with the Gottman Institute research.
Yes.
Because so for listeners that, the Gottmans have been probably the preeminent researchers on marriage stability and satisfaction for 40 years now.
Yeah.
And their primary method of researching is that they literally just film married couples. They film them fighting, they film them hanging out, they film them talking about random things in their relationships, and they've just built this massive archive of footage, and then they track those married couples longitudinally, and they see which ones divorce and break up, and then they go back and, if a couple gets divorced, they go back and they start looking at all the tape to like look at all the different micro expressions and transactions and different things that were said and different personality types and all that stuff to try to define commonalities through the marriages that stay together and stay happy and the marriages that end up falling apart. And he kind of came up with this framework that he calls bids for affection.
Right.
And it is really much about this responsiveness. Like, it's the Gottmans argue that it's the hallmark of happy couples is that each partner throughout the day is going to make bids for affection in different ways, whether it's through initiating a conversation or, putting your hand on their leg or asking them how they feel about something or asking for, to get something off a high shelf or whatever it is. And it's what they find is that happy, stable couples, a vast majority of those bids are fulfilled or responded to. And then the relationships that fall apart, there's a larger percentage of those bids are either ignored or they're shot down. Mm-hmm. The responsiveness piece, it really does, that feels like the DNA of a stable long-term commitment.
Yeah, and I think it's the basis more for like a more durable form of love. What you were describing is this initial infatuation.
Yeah.
And yes, I get that. Okay. But I think what you learn is that there is a more durable form of love that involves your active participation, not just how the other person makes you feel.
Yes.
Okay. It's like you're actively involved in the relationship in a way and building and sustaining that love. It's not just a thing that's just there. Mm-hmm. It's actually something you have to work at. And responsiveness is really one of the underlying bedrocks of it.
Yeah. So with that, why don't we get into the conclusion? So we've both made our arguments. We've rebutted each other. We've made counter arguments. I do think there is a clean way to synthesize all of this. And it actually comes back to Helen Fisher, who I mentioned at the top of the show. She has this framework that I love, and I actually wrote about, at this point, 15 years ago.
Is that right?
I wrote my first article about Helen Fisher in 2010.
What year is it? God. Oh my God.
2010, I wrote about Helen Fisher for the first time. And I wrote about this framework because it was, when I discovered it, it answered a lot of questions. And I think it actually is kind of the map to synthesize everything that you and I have both been talking about here. So she calls it the three loves framework. And what she has found in her research is that humans tend to experience what we call love, the single word for love. It's actually three different experiences, and they vary based on context and situation, and from person to person, but they vary biologically, neurologically. So the first one is lust, which is just sex drive. It's primarily hormonally driven. It's craving for sexual gratification. It's relatively indiscriminate. You are just kind of like, oh, that person's hot,
right?
And it doesn't go a whole lot further than that. You can feel it for anybody. You can feel it at any time. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. You can even be sexually attracted to somebody you actively don't like, which I think everybody's probably experienced at one time or another.
Oh yeah.
The second love, or the second mechanism, is romantic love. So this is that early stage limerence, infatuation, that I was railing against, that often gets glorified in the culture and rom-coms and old romantic movies or romantic novels. So romantic love is primarily driven by dopamine, norepinephrine. I can never say that fucking word. Norepinephrine and serotonin. It's characterized by an obsessive focus on a single person. And it's an obsession to the point of euphoria. There's intrusive thinking. There's an emotional roller coaster. When they don't text you back immediately, you're just at a nervous wreck. And then when they show up at your door, you're like elated and life is perfect. And then when they go home, you start freaking out that you're never going to see them again. And it's just kind of this very irrational up and down experience that you feel from moment to moment. And like your entire happiness revolves around them.
It's where the addiction metaphor comes in, really.
Yes, is absolutely. It maps very well to the addictive mechanisms inside the brain. And as the point you made was 100% true as well, is that it primarily evolved to focus our mating energy long enough on a single individual to build that pair bond, to build like the trust and respect and history and experiences together for a longer term relationship to actually initiate. Doesn't always initiate, but that's what the mechanism is there for. And then finally, the third love is the attachment system, or it's the companionate love, which is the one that we finished talking about. So this is primarily driven by oxytocin and vasopressin. It's a calmer, more peaceful, secure connection with a long-term partner. There's a deep sense of trust and safety. You know, it's funny when we did that happiness episode and we talked about Eastern and Western understandings of happiness, and how Western understanding of happiness is very excitable. It's like very dramatic and like these epic adventure and like really awesome day and like, oh my God, this was so cool, we'll never forget it. Whereas like an Eastern understanding of happiness is very peaceful and calm and serene. I would say that those two understandings of happiness map very well to romantic love and companionate love. Like romantic love is extremely exciting. It just feels like you are flying through the air. There's an adrenaline rush to it. It's a completely overwhelming feeling. Whereas companionate love is just this peace, this calm. It's a serenity. I've noticed it's crazy. Like there have been times where like my wife and I have actually noted it. Like we will just we won't even talk. Like we'll sit on the couch together. Maybe I'm playing a video game and she's reading a book, and we'll just be so happy for like hours. Like much happier than if we were skydiving or climbing the pyramids or whatever. Like in that moment, I would actually rather just be sitting on the couch with my wife, not doing anything. Oh shucks. But it is funny because it is, we talked about it as being boring. Yeah. I would say it is externally boring.
From the outside.
The outside, it looks incredibly boring. From the inside, if you are the one experiencing it, it is incredibly satisfying. It's actually in kind of a Buddhist sense, it is almost enlightening in that like you don't want to be anywhere else. You know, like I don't want to change this moment.
No craving.
It's a moment of no craving. Yeah. It's like I am fully whole and satisfied in this moment. And this is that long-term pair bond. This is the life partner. This is the social infrastructure that you talked about. This is the bedrock of human civilization, of the human family system. This is the parent bond that lasts long enough to raise healthy, thriving kids, to give them a better chance in their lives. All of the good long-term stuff comes out of this. Now, the interesting thing is that all three of these loves, they kind of operate separately within us. They can all be directed at the same person, but they can be directed at multiple people at different times. Also, what's interesting about the three loves is that they tend to be the entry point into the next one. So generally speaking, you find somebody sexy and then you go talk to them and then you kind of develop a romantic love for them. Like it doesn't happen the other way around, or at least not very often. It's like that initial sexual interest is what opens the door to meeting them and then experiencing that romantic love. And then that romantic love is what keeps you bonded to that person long enough to ideally start building that that companionate love. I think we're both correct in that when I was primarily criticizing romantic love because I think it is overrated, I think a large degree of that is for all the reasons I stated. But the thing that's interesting about romantic love is that it really is sort of a thing that just kind of happens. Like it's not a skill you can develop. It's not like, it's not something you can predict. It's not something you can go through a dating app and accurately predict like, oh, I'm going to fall in love with this person. I mean, there's a reason why people call it getting struck by lightning, because it just feels like it happens to you. You're
falling in love.
You're just like, holy shit, I'm obsessed with this person. And so as a result, I think people have a very passive disposition towards it. They're like, well, I hope it happens to me, and this is at one of the cores of my argument, is that because people overestimate it, they assume that all relationships function that way. So it's, you see single people who are like, well, I hope I meet my special someone one day, or I hope I meet the one, as if it's like something that just happens to them. The thing is that romantic love is just one middle step in a larger process. And you do have lots of control over other parts of that process, as we talked about in the dating episode. So it is like, I think one of the issues with it is that people just feel resigned to how they feel. And then once they do fall in love with somebody, they feel resigned to like, well, this is the person I fell in love with. So yeah, they're toxic and they treat me like shit, but
Can't help who you love.
But you can't help who you love. And it's like, it becomes a justification for like tolerating a lot of bad shit. And so for that reason, I think, and I imagine we both agree on this, that romantic love is highly overrated.
Yes.
That people need to really downgrade it in their mind. And I think it needs to be kind of culturally downgraded to a certain extent as well. Whereas companionate love is more active. It is skill-based. It is something that you have to mindfully approach and practice and get better at. Relationships do need maintenance. They do need repair. They also need upkeep. And these are skills that you can learn, but you mostly have to learn them by doing them. And I think you and I would probably both agree that companionate love is probably underemphasized or undertaught or underrated to a certain degree.
Yes, definitely. I'm going to point out, you did say this though, that you think each one of those forms of love is still necessary. I think it's in the emphasis where we get screwed up. So yeah, I would agree. Just like you shouldn't be doing lines of coke all the time, ever really. But, yeah, like that's not sustainable.
We're gonna put a quote on Instagram. It's like, do cocaine in moderation.
Yeah.
Drew Burney.
So yes, totally agree where we end up on this. Would be interested to see everybody leave some comments and see where you land on this though too. What did we miss? What do you think we maybe we were overemphasizing something?
Yeah.
Leave a comment for that. Maybe we'll put a poll up too on Spotify.
That'd be interesting
to see where we land on some of this.
Tell us who won the
there we go.
debate. Yeah,
there we go.
You know what's funny too is I do think there's a large aspect of culture in this as well. Like, I do think.
Oh yes.
Yeah, like I just think about living in Latin America and being married to a Latina.
Yeah. Romances.
There's a lot of emphasis put on romance, and you can see it in the results down there.
Well, and just the way we grew up with Disney movies and rom-coms too. That was a big shift, I think, from previous generations as well. So there's a huge cultural component to this. Yeah. You go talk to like Russians or people who live in Eastern Europe and something, and they're like, you guys are just obsessed with this. This is weird. So it's definitely, there's a cultural element to it.
I do think you need both. Like, I do think
and there's nothing wrong with romantic love. I don't want to say there's the overemphasis is the problem.
In a vacuum, there's nothing wrong. It's just like, you have to be aware that it will often come up with the wrong people. And you just need to be ready for that. Like, just don't blindly trust it.
Yeah. Maybe that's where evolution screwed up, is that, we had to learn that first before actually going through it. But,
again, I think it's probably because most of human history, we evolved where there wasn't a whole lot of downside to falling in love with the wrong person.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, it's worst case scenario. Okay. Well, you have another baby, and it's like everybody's in the same tribe. Everybody knows each other. Everybody's each other's cousin. So like, what's the difference? Right. Whereas in the modern world, if you fall in love with the wrong person, like, there can be some pretty drastic
stakes,
repercussions.
right.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Yeah, this was fun. I like this format. Let us know, everybody, how you feel about this format, if you enjoyed it as much as we do. I think I could see us doing this again if people are really into it. As always, please follow us and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. It's the best thing you can do to help us get the word out to more people, to help other people experience the joys of falling in love with the Solve podcast.
That's right.
There's nothing like it. I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Until next time, everybody, I love you.